this lesson, we're looking at some tricks we can use when we're working with roots and with indices to make the equations easier to solve. The first thing we're going to look at is here we have a multiplication. We have 2's and 3's being multiplied together. There's 3 2's and 3 3's. Now we could write this in two different ways. So we could write that this way or this way, depending on the way that we group the numbers. So in the first one, we've grouped all of our 2's and we've grouped all of our 3's. And because there's 3 2's and 3 3's, we can write 2 to the power of 3 and 3 to the power of 3. With the second one, we've grouped them in lots of 2 times 3. We've got 3 of them. So what we've done here is we've got 2 times 3, and because it's cubed, we know that there's 3 lots of them. So this is another way of representing the exact same equation. So that lets us know that these two equations are exactly the same. 2 to the power of 3 times 3 to the power of 3 is the same as 2 times 3 all to the power of 3. We can generalize this and we'll get this algebraic expression. So we've got a to the power of n times b to the power of n. Note that the powers have to be the same here for this to work. So we can't have 2 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 5, for example. That's not going to then be 2 times 3 to 2 or 5. Yeah. So this is not going to work. They have to be the same number. So these two have to be the same. And then that's going to tell us what this one is here. And then we can simplify it to a times b together and then to that power. Now this can be helpful just because it might make it a bit easier for us to multiply things when they're smaller before we've squared them. Say we got 2 squared times 4 squared. It's easier to go 2 times 4, which is 8 all squared. Actually, I'll put in the step 2 times 4 squared equals 8 squared. And then tell that's 64. That might be easier than going 4 times 16, and then having to multiply a big number. Again, that will come to 64, and you can work it out that way. But this is an important rule to know, and especially when we start looking at algebra next year in relationship with our indices. Now, there's some other important things to know, and these ones are to do with roots. Basically, what's happening is if we have a root of two numbers being multiplied together, we can split this and write it separately. And if we have two numbers being divided, we can split this and we can divide the square roots of each one individually. This doesn't work when we have addition or subtraction. So below we've got our addition that's not going to equal if we took the square root of a and the square root of b separately and added them together. And the same for subtraction, it's not going to work that way. So here we've gotten two numbers. For example, if we had 2 times 3, we could write that as a square root of 2 times the square root of 3. And with the second one, again, we could go square root of 2 over 3 would be the same as the square root of 2 over the square root of 3. Now in these cases, it's not very helpful to do this, but in the examples we see below, we will see why this is useful. And here's just an example which might help get your head around it a bit more. Here we've got the square root of 7 times the square root of 5, and it equals this number. Now, if we change this to make it the square root of 7 times 5, all square rooted at once, then we're going to get the same number. So we can see that this is the same, which is another way of writing our equation. So before we had square root of ab equals square root of a times square root of b, but it also works the other way. And this is perhaps the more useful way, at least today. Okay, so we've got these 3 rules. Make sure if you haven't been writing notes that you stop and you write these ones down. You need to remember these, and we're going to use them for the next questions. So this is our first question. This one has a division, and it's going to be a square root divided by another square root, which, if you look at the rules, is going to match this one. Square root divided by a second is going to be the same as the square root of the first divided by the second. So we're going to rewrite this. So we can say that it equals 242 over 2. We can simplify this. Hopefully you can do this in your head. You get 121. If you couldn't do this in your head, you could do it by long division. So 2, 4, 2. You're going to get 1, 2, 1. And then we can now find the square root of 121 because we know that the square root of 121 is 11. Or we know that 11 squared is 121. So that's our first question. And that's an example of how that becomes easier when we can bring them together, because you can't actually find the square root of 2. So this is one way we can use this. This is our second equation. Now you could solve this the traditional way of going 3 squared is 9 times 16, but then you have to do some, perhaps not too difficult, but still difficult maths, where we'd be multiplying 9 by 16. It's going to be a bit easier if we use this rule and we combine them. So instead of going 3 squared times 4 squared, we write this as 3 times 4. Now remember, these are the same, the 2's are the same, or the powers, so we can do this. So we get 3 times 2 squared. Now that's going to become 12 squared, and we know that 12 squared is going to be 144. So that just becomes an easier way of approaching this question. Now it's your turn. Have a go at solving this one, and you're going to have to use this rule here. Okay, so if we rewrite this one, we're going to get, we start with 288 divided by square root of 2. We can rewrite this as a fraction. So square root of 288 divided by 2. Again, if you don't know how to do this in your head, you can use long division. You're going to get square root of 144, which we should know by now is going to be 12. And now have a go at this one. Okay, so we can't just find the square root of 3 or the square root of 12. So we're going to have to use this rule here. So square root of 12 times the square root of 3 is going to be the same as the square root of 12 times 3, which is going to be the square root of 36, which we should know is 6. Now, if you've had any questions throughout, please do bring them to me. We will be practicing this a bit more in class too. Thank you.